Hello everybody, welcome once again to the Inner Sanctum. My name's James.
My name is Adie. Today we are going to be discussing psychics.
Yes, and I think it was just, people talk about the zeitgeist and understanding about what's hot at the moment and what people are talking about, and really psychic mediums never really went away.
No.
People always talk about psychics. It seems to be an inherent part of the paranormal that you just can't escape from. The moment you tell somebody, oh, I'm a paranormal investigator, one of the first things they tend to say is, oh, are you psychic? Have you got psychic powers? Or which psychics do you work with? And those sorts of things. And it's just...
That's perpetuated though from the shows that people watch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, media's really driven that. I think you can't really avoid talking about psychics when you talk about the paranormal. And I think that today is a real opportunity for us to take that subject by the throat and really tell people what we think about psychics and psychic mediums and the whole range of these the supposed powers that these people have. So we're going to talk about psychics today, and what I'm really pleased about is we've got more questions from our listeners. This is great, and I want people to really keep that up because Absolutely. It's fantastic.
Yeah, we'll start straight away. Those of you who listened to the last episode will remember Louise, and we'll go to number one, I think.
Okay.
The first question is, and it does relate to the subject we're going to discuss tonight, what are your views on Derek Acorah?
Could I answer that one first?
Absolutely.
Right, well, without slandering people, because like we said, we're not into that caper on the Inner Sanctum, but my views on Derek Acorah, that he's an entertainer. The guy has used the title of psychic medium to great effect. I think he's made a lot of money, he's made a lot of fame for himself. Do I think he's got any particular abilities? No, I don't think he has. And I don't think that, without going, giving away everything in the show and what I feel, I don't think that there are any psychic mediums that have anything different to your run-of-the-mill normal people. But in terms of Derek Acorah, TV personality, television psychic, he did a lot of stuff on psychometry towards the sort of back end of, I'd probably say the back end of his career. So I think that really he started out as a TV psychic and has really kind of moved into stage, because the people that go to a stage performance are people that are interested, because they're going to pay for it. If you don't like him, unless you're going to go there to heckle him, if you don't like him, you're not going to pay whatever the price is for a ticket to go and see him.
That's expensive heckling though, isn't it? Let's face it.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've always found Derek very entertaining to watch.
Oh yeah, he definitely was most haunted, wasn't he?
Oh, absolutely.
Getting possessed every 10 minutes.
I think that's when... I think when he first started on the show, I was quite impressed to begin with.
Yeah.
But obviously in the back of my head, I'm thinking, this is a TV program, Adie, come on. I'm not saying you got given that information at all, but you certainly get the idea. It's a TV program at the end of the day. There are certain...
Yeah, can you imagine if he was there and they just went, are you getting anything, Derek? And he just went, no. And then for the entire programme, no, I'm getting nothing. Can you imagine that? Yes. How great would that be?
So where do you want to go, Derek? To the pub?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't think they expected this when he joined that show, was that he literally became almost front and centre of that show. It wasn't...
it revolved around him, didn't it?
Yeah, there wasn't Yvette and Carl and all the rest of the team. No. It was more like Derek Acorah and the Most Haunted team.
Yeah.
At least that's how it came across, because the guy is obviously a born entertainer.
Yeah.
He knows how to switch it on when he needs to. Do I personally think that he has an ability to speak to the dead? No. I think he created a different way of doing it by saying, "What's that you say, Sam?" Which to me makes him a very good actor, that he can literally switch back and forth like he's having a conversation in his head.
Yeah.
Which is very, very, very good.
Well, I mean, maybe he is.
He may
but,
be. He may have been.
Know.
We don't know. You already mentioned the Creed Kafer part earlier on.
Yeah.
And no matter what anybody thinks, that's pretty damning evidence to say that he was making things up.
And he was pretty much at the height of his power when that happened.
Absolutely.
It's not like you could argue that he was just starting out, he fell into a trap because he's trying to kind of ingratiate himself into the show. That was really quite late in his career, and it sank him, didn't it?
It completely, because in the last few seasons of Most Haunted, he went from being 90 to 100% correct on everything he was saying. All of a sudden they started having little parts that popped up at the bottom of the screen.
They did.
Cannot find anything on it. You know, it was almost like they woke up, if that makes sense. There's things that were happening and going, I don't think so.
Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the time, you know, years and years ago, Harry Price, when he used to have a psychic medium called that he worked with called Rudy Schneider. And Harry Price would tout Rudy Schneider around, you know, making him out to be this fantastic psychic, but actually something happened. We don't know exactly what happened. Harry either decided that he didn't like Rudy anymore, or they'd had a falling out, or maybe he thought it was damaging to his career to be involved with a psychic. All of a sudden then he was exposing him as being fraud and, you know, not being psychic at all. So it almost reminded me slightly of the fact that they kind of grown tired of the medium in the show, maybe because he was, like you say, becoming the centre of the
he was the centre of the show at that point.
And maybe they just thought, you know what, this guy's getting too big for his boots, so maybe we should start. I mean, literally, they started. It's like trolling him, isn't it? And bullying him on the screen by saying, at this moment in time, Derek was talking bollocks. It's like that sort of thing, isn't it?
We can't find any information about the crap he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's how it came across.
And whereas before, they would just say nothing. You know, they would just go, you know, we'll look into that later, as opposed to, he said there was a Mary Richardson in this house. We have found no family members called Mary Richardson whatsoever. They didn't exist. Derek's talking nonsense.
Exactly.
There was never any of that, was there?
I actually felt sorry for him
when
they started doing it.
Bullied.
It's almost like they hung him out to dry.
Yeah.
You know, it's there going, I'm doing what you asked me to do.
Yeah.
And now you're going, nah, Derek, see you later, mate.
It is sad, really.
Here's money for your taxi home. Off you go.
He was comedy gold, though. Sometimes, though, when he used to, some of those episodes, you see them pop up every now and again when he go things like, "Oh, they were tossed, Adie. They were tossed." You know, when he said that about them.
The most famous one. Mary loves dick.
That was it.
Mary loves dick. And I apologise to everybody for my really terrible Liverpudlian accent.
It was hilarious, though, wasn't it?
It was funny. And I think that got more replays than any other clip that's ever been on Most Haunted. Right. Yeah. Just for the hilarity of what he actually said.
And you could see the reaction on Yvette's face.
She
at the
knew.
Time she was ready to collapse laughing, but she had to keep her lip.
I'll tell you what, no matter what anyone says about Yvette, she's got a wonderfully filthy sense of humour.
Yeah, she has actually.
Anybody who follows her Twitter will understand this. So that's...
sorry, Lou, that's what we think of Derek Acorah.
Yes, absolutely. On to question number 2. She'll love the fact that we said all that. Right. Do you think it's easy for mediums to con people into giving money when they are frauds?
Really interesting question.
I'm going to answer with just a few things. Do I think it's easy for mediums to con people? Yes. And especially when those people are grieving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, exactly, yeah.
You know, and these...
Well, it forms a large percentage of their clientele, doesn't it?
Of course.
Really?
And these people are essentially going to these people for closure, for help. I guess a psychologist in one respect, which involves people telling you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's extremely easy for psychics to con people, whether they're real or not. Yes, very easy, and it upsets me that people deal with their bereavement and their grief by going to speak to total strangers like this.
I think it's a natural thing. I think a lot of people feel the need, like you say, for closure, to maybe get answers. You know, people die in different ways. Some people pass away in their sleep. Some people die horrific deaths and suffer trauma in their lives. And I think some people go to psychic mediums to put their minds at ease. You know, is the person that suffered cancer in their last 6 months of their life, for example, now without pain and free and happy? You know, ultimately they want an answer that everything's actually going to be okay when you die, and I think psychics deliver that message.
Agreed, and something, I think we had this conversation in private actually, but I can actually agree with what you said. They're providing a service. Now, whether or not people see that as being fleeced or whatnot, these people are helping these people with their grief.
Well, are they though? Because if you look at the psychology of bereavement, you know, does it help somebody, or does it hinder somebody's healing process to think of that person still being alive on the other side but being unreachable some way without doing it through a medium? And again, that kind of poses the problem for me, is in the sense that kind of perpetuates the business for the medium. Because if I tell you, let's say you're a vulnerable person, and I'll cover vulnerability as well in a second, but you're a vulnerable person and you come to me as a psychic in inverted commas, and I tell you that I can contact your grandmother, and I say a few things through cold reading, and I tell you a few things about your grandmother that strikes a chord, and I tell you that she's okay and that she's without pain and she loves you and all the rest of it, and you go away thinking, oh wow, that was fantastic. Now, as a human being, because of the endorphins you get and the rush that you get from that message, you want more. So you want to come back to me again when next time you want to talk to your grandmother, and again and again and again. So is it going to give you closure? Maybe, but actually it's going to give me money as well, because I'm psychic, you're paying for it. And I think the other thing, like I said about vulnerability, in any other industry, if you sell something to someone who is clearly vulnerable, then ethically and morally that's viewed in society, or even legally, as wrong. In the realm of the psychic world, that seems perfectly acceptable, that somebody who is deeply bereaved, there could be someone suffering tragic loss of somebody they cared about, and they're vulnerable, and they're handing over money to somebody that gives them information, irrespective of where that information comes from. But if they're frauds, then, like you said, that person's being fleeced and they're vulnerable. So really, you know, should this be an industry that's regulated? You know, should there be legislation against people who provide a service that can't be justified or evidenced in exchange for money to vulnerable people?
I would say yes.
It's a question of ethics, isn't it?
Of course, it's something you've been bringing up a lot of lately, ethics. I don't think I've thought about it in as much detail as you did, but definitely there's an... Do these people think of that when they're sitting there telling them, these people, as you said, vulnerable, what they want to hear? I doubt it very much, especially when it comes down to repeat business, is what you were talking about earlier on. You know, £20-25 for an email reading or whatever it is. How did you get that information in the first place? You know, if this doesn't send up alarm bells to certain people when you're out there, there's not much more I can say. Or yourself, for that matter. You know, because we often speak about belief on the inner sanctum.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you have to believe that the people you are contacting for this service are going to give you those readings of the things that you want to hear, because they have an ability which can't be proven. Exactly. That they have the ability.
Yeah, exactly. You know, if you're bereaved, the mental health issues involved with bereavement, that can be long term or it can be transient. So it could come and go. You can, depending on what that person meant to you, you could deal with the pain of the loss to start off with, and then gradually heal and get over it and remember them and be happy about the fact that you've still got your life and that person's moved on and that, you know, everything's okay now. But to some people that continues and can continue for the rest of their life. So that person remains, in my eyes, remains vulnerable, and I think that they're being exploited by psychics. Now, I've seen countless arguments on social media, television, I've heard it on radio before, where psychics have been challenged over, if you had a real ability and if you really wanted to help people who are suffering loss, you would do it for free. And the response that comes back is always, well, if I was a painter and a decorator and somebody wanted their house doing up, should I do that for free because I'm helping my fellow man? You know, all these sorts of questions they throw the questions back like, well, I've got an ability and a gift. I'm not going to just let that, people exploit that and use it for nothing. It takes a great deal of energy. But actually, we don't know that it does. They might think that it does. There's no evidence to support psychic mediumship as being a legitimate power or gift. Not really. There's information that is gleaned in some way from an individual and then relayed back to somebody who may or may not decide that fits with their life or with things that they care about or things that they know to be true. But there's still no evidence to say this particular psychic, out of all the ones that we tested, this one is genuine. There's not been any of that in 200 years. And actually, let's jump onto that. I say 200 years, talking about psychic mediumship in terms of spiritualism from the 1840s onwards. But actually, psychic mediumship, let's face it, has actually been going on for millennia. If you look at things like the Oracle at Delphi, 3,000 years ago, ancient Greece, you look at all of these people that supposedly would be able to connect with the spirits or the gods, soothsayers and all the rest of it. These characters go back thousands of years. Shaman in ancient cults, faiths that go back to the dawn of man. They were still doing something to connect with their ancestors as they would believe it to be. So psychic mediumship's not really a new thing, it's just a recent label that's been added to it. But actually, in all of those things, there's still nothing to suggest that any of those were actually real. There could be altered states of consciousness, for example, or just delusional individuals who themselves may have mental health problems and believe they can talk to spirits and angels, but actually they're not. They've got a psychosis that tells them that they can. And maybe combined with being overly perceptive and more perceptive than other people, so kind of like a reverse autism. So they're not disconnected, they're more connected than anybody else you can ever imagine. But actually they might themselves have problems, and then they're just bringing people into their world because they have a deep-seated need to be in the limelight, to get the attention. Yeah. So these people themselves that claim to be psychics may have no ability whatsoever, they may have mental health issues themselves, and in turn are then giving information to other people who are vulnerable. That's a recipe for disaster, especially when money's changing hands.
Well, you could look at it this way. Maybe they generally believe that they have this gift.
I don't doubt it.
I talked earlier on about being fraudulent and things like that. Well, perhaps then they just don't know that they are.
Yeah.
I think I said it on another Sanctum, where if somebody's out in the street telling them that God is listening, is talking to them, and they're relaying this and that from God, we call that person crazy.
Yeah.
As a society, and these people used to get thrown into loony bins because these people are a bit out there.
Yeah.
But because you called yourself a psychic medium and saying, I can hear your dead loved ones, all of a sudden they're celebrated and we give them money?
Yeah.
What's the difference between the two? Because I don't think there's one.
I think the only difference between the two is that the first one is arbitrary, somebody in the street ranting, compared with a psychic, in inverted commas, that has gone out actively to seek people who are vulnerable and exploit them for money.
Yeah, but that person may actually be hearing a voice.
Yeah.
But we ignored it because of the way he put out.
Exactly, the way they presented it.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't think there's much difference between the two.
No.
I just don't. And I'm drawing my own conclusions over the years because I've worked with many people who claim to be psychic mediums.
Yeah.
And I've said before, there's some more impressive than others. I did work with somebody who I thought was really impressive, if I'm honest.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, I think it's my own nature that starts kicking in and starts making me go, really? And that's probably just me, to be totally honest with you. I can't help myself. Whereas I can believe in something, but only for so long before my my rationalism kicks in and go, what are you doing, Adie?
But the thing is the beauty of it is that you kind of hit the nail on the head with that. You're a rational, logical individual, right? You analyse things, you think very deeply about things. And I'd like to think that I'm the same.
You are.
You know, we're very similar in that respect. But the thing is that we're both human. So just because we're logical, rational individuals doesn't make us robots.
No.
And I think that we fall into that trap of our emotions taking control of ourselves. We all do it. And I think that psychic mediums, and I'm using that term because I don't want to have to keep saying in inverted commas, but I think that these types of people know that. And at any point in your life, you will be vulnerable and you will succumb to your emotions, and that's how they exploit us.
Absolutely. Emotions rule us. We're emotional beings.
Exactly.
And ultimately, we will always succumb to our emotions.
Yeah.
Whereas I think somebody like me and James, yes, we're very emotional people, but our rationality kicks in that holds it at bay, especially in this field that we're in, you know, which helps us ultimately. So although we're connected to our emotions, we also can remain static and outside of that for when we're investigating.
Absolutely. Believe me, there's, you know, these great psychic mediums, they know exactly what buttons to press. That's why they're filling theatres of 2,000-3,000 people. You know, I won't name names, but there are people that fill large theatres with thousands of people and will hold them, you know, capture their imagination and hold them for a couple of hours, you know, for their readings or whatever it is that they're giving them en masse. Now, if a person can do that and a film can do that, it's not beyond the wit of man to think that somebody claiming to be a psychic medium knows which buttons to press, and they'll just do it because they're very clever. They can ask you some initial questions, then gives a certain degree of information away, then think, right, I know what kind of person you are, I know exactly the sort of things to say to you.
Mentalists do that. They watch your face for the emotion to see if you, I don't know, little micro expressions of raising your eyebrows and things like this. A friend of mine, Amy, said recently that when I'm on an investigation and somebody says something stupid, I tend to do a certain look.
Right.
That's the sort of thing that she'd pick up. I tend to...
That's your tell.
That's my tell.
Yeah.
Which is my way of saying you're talking crap.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When I have to walk away because I'll say something I shouldn't, and I'm not there to upset anybody. But I think that's the same thing with this, like you're saying.
I think
it's a lot of people reading faces.
And I think there are some really perceptive people out there that make great counsellors or great nurses. They're people who are so empathetic with other people that they can read their emotions, they understand people's state of mind, and they do an unbelievably brilliant job.
Yes.
Health workers, all that sort of stuff, they know exactly how to deal with people, vulnerable people. But if you then flip that and say that you've got the same sort of person with the same sort of skills, but actually they've turned it into a business venture and then it becomes exploitative, if one type of person can exist, the nurse, the health worker, the counsellor, why not the antithesis of that, which is the person that goes, you're vulnerable, I can exploit you? That is that sort of person.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that all psychics are like that, but I'm saying that there will be people that, for them, it's just business.
The interesting thing about this, though, because evidently it's a subject matter or a skill that these people have that's not recognised in any way.
No.
You know, if that was true, I would go to my doctor, say something's going on or whatever, and he says, I'm just going to refer you to our resident psychic medium. Don't worry, this person will get in touch with who you need to speak to and we can help you. That doesn't happen.
No. You don't get spiritual guidance from your GP.
It's not on the NHS.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
Even if you were suffering bereavement or any kind of mental health issues, you would get a counsellor, and that would be somebody that knows the questions to ask you, knows how to pitch their tone, their style to suit your own, you know, state of mind. Somebody that really understands which buttons that they can press to get the reaction that they need to get from you, maybe to release anger or to release frustration or deep-seated emotion. They know that, and that's what I'm saying. There are people there, the opposite, somebody that knows how to do that, but they do that for their own gain, and that saddens me. It angers me as well that there are people out there that exploit vulnerable people.
And the fact that these people have so little empathy that they can do it. And
the thing is, as though you've got people, they don't even know how they do it, so they think that they have a skill and an ability, so they might make you cry by giving you a consultation and a reading. They think that actually they're getting that information from the spirit world. They're probably not, but to them they are. So it kind of, going back to this confirmation bias thing, the reaction that they get from the person that they're doing the sitting for then confirms that they have a skill, so it's self-perpetuating, rather than thinking, how am I actually able to do this, and try to analyse themselves. What is it that I'm actually doing that allows me to pick this up about this person? But no, I think some of them think, I have a gift, I have a special power, and maybe that special power is just being more perceptive than other people.
And I agree with your statement about perception. I do, and I believe that's what it is.
Yeah,
I think it's extremely highly perceptible people.
Yeah, intense. Yeah,
pinpointing it, and maybe they're just amazingly really good counsellors of what they could be.
That's what I think.
And it's just that they've given themselves a label and doing it a different way, instead of going off to college and university and doing this a different way.
Yeah.
You know, where they could literally say, I'm a counsellor, I'm a psychiatrist.
Exactly.
That's what I think.
Yeah, I agree. Wasn't that a fantastic question?
We've only just got to number 3, but here we go. That sounded bad, didn't it? We've only just got to number 3.
No, keep going.
I don't mean it like that.
Love
right,
it.
So, do you think it's possible that mediums can connect with a spirit of their choice, rather than a spirit who may be close by?
Ooh, I like that one. So this is a kind of a focus thing, as opposed to, I'm getting something coming through and I don't know who it's going to be. So almost like being able to dial up the person that you want on the psychic telephone.
That's what I was thinking. It's like a mobile device calling out to them. Yeah,
that's an interesting question. What are your thoughts on that one?
No.
Right.
No, I don't.
What is it on the premise that if we're talking about psychic mediums talking to spirits, you're saying that you don't believe that they do talk to spirits, so therefore they're not.
I'm approaching it in a more rational way. If somebody wants to talk to, I don't know, Elvis Presley, and they live in Africa, I fail to see how the communication happens. In fact, I can't rationalise it in any way. How could you do that seriously? Even if the second part of the question says if a ghost is nearby, or a spirit, that maybe, because that's a bit more. Actually, there's somebody near us at the minute.
So it's something within the environment that they're currently in, as opposed to
I kind of see them slightly different, because if you believe that psychics are real and things like that, and to be fair, if they were, I would expect them to walk down the street and suddenly stop and go, somebody here, but they don't. But to get in touch with a select spirit, how? I'm not quite sure where I'm going with
this.
It's
a fascinating question, though, because it's asking if a psychic has the ability to communicate with a spirit, then therefore they should be able to. You want to speak to your Auntie Mabel, for example. The psychic could then just rest back and then just say, "Oh yeah, I've now contacted her." Right, so that means that irrespective of where you are in the world, you will be able to contact this particular individual, as opposed to, Pete Watkins is here in the room with me, and he's only ever going to be here because he's the only spirit that lives in my house. So you want to talk to Auntie Mabel, forget it. You're going to have to go to where Auntie Mabel died. Yeah, but she died in Australia. Yeah, you're going to have to go there and talk to an Australian psychic. But do you see what I'm getting at?
I just can't rationalise it in my head.
It's just crazy.
I just can't. You know, I like to think long and hard about things, but this one just went, no. You know, I'm not normally quite so blunt, but no, not on this occasion. I can't. I can't think of anything that would make me go, well, how do they do it? Okay, so what do? They close their eyes, they go into transmediumship, they get themselves onto the spirit plane or dimension. Do they go up there, maybe there's a big screen up, they type up, I'm looking for, you know...
Aunt Mabel, of which there's about 20 million.
Yeah, exactly. Aunt Mabel from Lancaster.
Yeah.
And it comes up and they go, oh, hold on a minute, I'm Aunt Mabel from Lancaster, and they come back with you.
Yeah.
You see where I'm going, right?
As opposed to, I'm looking for Aunt Mabel, but that's irrelevant because only Pete Watkins is in the vicinity and no one wants to talk to him.
Exactly. Oh, poor.
You see, I'm getting at. He's just waiting for.
He's waiting for the right person to come along to have a chat.
Exactly. That's what's bizarre about the whole situation, isn't it? How would they be able to facilitate that communication?
And the thing is, if you speak to a psychic, they won't tell you how it happens anyway.
Or if they do tell you, all of them will tell you different, but they'll all claim to have similar powers.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, I would expect that if you ask the psychic the same question, they should give you the same answer.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, it's going to be the same way that every other psychic in the world, or alleged psychic in the world, performs that particular service.
Yeah.
So if they're going, yeah, I can talk to your Uncle Randy, and how I do this is I go through a list of things. But you go and speak to another psychic and say, yeah, I can get in touch with your Uncle Randy. But what I've got to do is send a text on my phone, and it goes to the spirit realm, and he texts me back and comes back on the line, and then we have a chat.
Yeah. Or then another psychic medium says, well, I use crystals.
Yes.
You know, it's like, well, why are there so many different methods to contact the same person? Why would you need that? And if they all have the same latent ability, then it should be identical for every psychic.
And that's why I can't rationalise it.
Doesn't make sense, does it?
No.
Some of them say things like, I can understand the argument that some of them will say, well, I don't get actual dialogue, I get images, right? Somebody else might say, well, I get colours and I interpret the colours into emotions, and then I translate that in my own mind, and I tell you that I'm getting a feeling of love because I'm getting the colour orange or whatever. I can understand that, but the thing is that none of their messages will add up. You know, if you had 5 psychics in a room, let's say you separate them into separate rooms, right? One room is sort of split off, and you go to each one to talk to Auntie Mabel, I bet you get 5 or at least 3 or 4 different versions of Auntie Mabel that come through with different messages. Not one of them will say, why are you contacting me again, James? I've just spoken you through this other guy.
I was literally going to say that.
When would that would never happen? They'd all just go, oh yeah, she's happy to talk again. My Auntie Mabel would be really seriously annoyed if she had to talk to me 5 times within the space of half an hour.
Agreed.
Crazy, isn't it?
Agreed. So yeah, I think we've put our thoughts across of what we think. I think I don't know, maybe it's because I've been in situations where, you know, mediums are saying they're talking to the spirit in the location.
Yes, yeah, I've been there as well.
Many times.
Yeah.
Which I guess I kind of try and rationalise in my head a little bit more than somebody making a phone call to heaven or the spirit plane, the 6th dimension, whatever you want to call it. You know, I find that a little bit easier, but at the same time I don't.
That reminds me of a story. Actually, there was a guy back in the early 1900s, I think, that built a device which he called psychophone, and apparently he'd communicated with this guy that had come up who wanted to communicate with his wife, and he'd communicated with his wife, but actually what happened is it was this guy that had created the phone, it was his wife that was backstage and was talking to this man, but actually this man became obsessed with communicating with his deceased wife through the psychophone, and went to see this medium guy that had created the psychophone device when his wife wasn't backstage, and yet still was able to communicate with the spirit supposedly of his deceased wife. But again, this is a device. Why would you need a telephone to communicate with spirit if you've already got mediums who can do that in a much more organic and much more direct
and personal
way? Exactly.
It's more personal.
It just doesn't add up, does it?
No, not at all. Not at all. Shall we move on to the next question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. No, I can answer this one actually. Right. Have either of you received a reading from a psychic? If so, were they accurate? Yes, I have.
No, I haven't. I haven't received a direct reading from someone, so I've not actually gone to a psychic or had a psychic say, I'm going to tell you stuff about yourself. I've been present when a psychic has relayed information to me about a couple of deceased people in my life, but I've never had a reading. The information that I was given was semi-accurate. but it was so general that my rational side of me says, well, it was because it was so general, it was very, very easy for me to validate, as opposed to somebody, you know, giving me a nickname or telling me something specific about moments I'd shared with that particular individual. But you actually had a proper full-on reading.
Actually, it was the same day I went to Borley.
Oh, right, okay.
So we me and my two friends, we turned it into a day. They were going to go and get readings,
right,
from these two mediums. Actually, there were two mediums there, and I thought, all right then, I'll run this as a bit of an experiment. Okay, I'll come with you and I'll get a reading.
Yeah,
and I went into the reading and told the medium I'm going to record this, set my phone up to...
And they were happy about that, were they? Oh, that's great.
I've got to set this up to record, I want to listen back to it and all this kind of thing. The person was fine. He starts talking and talking and talking. None of it's making any sense to me. You know, you're going to, you know, find love within the next 6 months.
Right.
So I'm already beginning to roll my eyes. And he says, oh, there's a spirit coming into the room. It's a family member. Or actually, you have another family member coming in. Two people, two spirits of a inverted comments of come into the room. Adie, I said, what's their names? And he said, well, it feels like. And I went, whoa, let me stop you. What do you mean? What it feels like? And he goes, well, it feels like because you can hear them, right? He says, yeah, I can hear them. So what do you mean it feels like? Surely you'll be saying they're telling me their names are.
Exactly, yeah.
And I saw a little bit of colour coming into his cheeks.
Okay.
So I thought, gotcha.
You've riled him a bit.
Yeah, I've gotcha.
Yeah.
You know I've got you now. But he maintained his cool and continued on with this reading. And then two names that he gave me, I have absolutely no connection with whatsoever.
You see, the thing is that if you'd probably pushed that and said, no, that's not, they don't mean anything to me, they could probably then twist that and say, no, I'm talking, this is a long time ago, you may not even know these people. So you can get out of anything, really, can't
Agreed,
you?
but because I confronted him directly, and I did it with logic, he had no answer for me. So I came to be fair, the actual guy who did it is a nice guy, to be fair, so I wasn't like, I thought I'd just spend 20 quid on nothing is what I thought. But as an experiment, it worked quite well for me, so it kind of reaffirmed what I already thought. I've
heard of some of the practices that have been used by stage psychics from, you know, past 40 years or so. Some of the stuff in America when it was really popular in America, where I think there was one guy called Peter Popoff. Do you remember Peter Popoff?
I know that name.
This guy was rumbled by James Randi.
Yes, he picked up on the radio transmission.
That's right, yeah. He hacked into the radio and you could hear his wife telling him all of the information.
Right, and James tuned in to the frequency of it and listened to it, didn't he? And then he just literally...
It was the address of somebody, and he was able to read back the address to this woman and, you know, really convince her that what he was saying was real.
This guy was massive, wasn't he?
Yeah, but the thing is that people still believe in him. Or at least they did, you know, even after that exposure, people still believed that he had the gift. But the thing is that I've heard other practices like there would be researchers that would go into the waiting crowds of people who were about to go into the theatre, and they would just hang around and listen to certain stories or conversations and make notes and then relay that back, and then they would tell those, you know, the psychic which people they were, their description of them, and they'd be able to relay that information.
Wasn't there another medium who did that? It was really popular in the 80s, Doris Stokes.
Doris Stokes.
She did that, didn't she?
I think I'm not sure.
She
Doris Stokes was it that did that?
I'm pretty sure she had stooges though that went into the audience. I'm sure I read that.
I can well believe it. You know, there were another thing that they've done is they have people complete cards before they go in.
Yeah, which has all the information.
Yeah, you know, who's it you're looking for, what's, you know, any particular object that you're carrying that relates to that individual, blah, blah, blah. And those people with good faith would complete those surveys, or questionnaires really, I suppose it is, rather than a survey, and hand those in. And then the person would be just using those cards in order to target those people.
Yeah, pick out 4 or 5 people, memorise it and go in.
Exactly, but I think some of those things are, you know, they're easily done. They're easy to rumble these days. People are a lot more sophisticated, I think. But, you know, as society becomes more sophisticated, so too does the stage act in order to cope with that. You know, the more difficult it is to crack a safe, the better the safe cracker needs to be.
You have to keep your skills.
And I think that's what they do. They're just keeping with the times, and they'll be using whatever technology is available.
And we spoke about it in the last one. They just changed their names of what they are. The empath now,
indeed. Yeah.
And then they'll go back to being a psychic medium.
Yeah.
And when that gets a bit more boring and somebody's rumbled out of it, they'll go back to being an empath.
Yeah.
And that will just perpetuate like it has done
It will,
for the last,
because they all are stage acts, really. They're all entertainers, and they all need a unique selling point.
Agreed.
And of course, you know, they can do whatever they can to make themselves stand out, because ultimately that's what brings them the fame and the attention and the money. So
ultimately, I think a lot of these people just want to be famous.
Yeah, I think you're right. Attention seekers.
Yeah, you know, if you go back to listen to one of our podcasts, the blue-haired woman.
Yeah, I remember that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly.
That kind of person will want attention. Otherwise, they won't have blue hair and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So. It's a particular personality profile of an individual.
Yeah.
And if you read books on things like anomalistic psychology, you'll see that demographic and profiling of people is a really important factor in your belief in paranormal phenomena. The more marginalised you become, the more likely you are to believe in more fantastical things.
Yeah.
That's proven with statistics. Like I said, anomalistic psychology is a very interesting subject matter to look into, but it doesn't have to make you sceptical about everything.
I think the longer we're in this field, James, the more sceptical we've become.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, when I first started, I don't think I was quite as sceptical. Rational maybe, but not as sceptical as I am now.
I agree.
You know, over time, I think I've become more, as I said, it's sceptical
and cynical, probably as well. Cynical. You become more jaded, don't you, about things?
Absolutely, and I'm very inclined not to believe. Even working with mediums now, they'll say this, they'll say that, and I tend to be like, no. I never used to be like that. I was very much into it at one point, especially when I was spending a lot of time with mediums.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I've already told the story of what I think snapped me out of it.
Yeah,
was that when it comes to mediums now, I'm kind of like, no. You know, impressive they may be, some people, and they are extremely impressive.
Oh yeah, well,
but
you know, they're good entertainers.
Yeah, unfortunately now I think I'm kind of stopped dead in my tracks when it comes to mediums now, and I tend not to put much credence in them. That's just my experience, I think.
But if they have, you know, if there are people out there that really stun you with information that they give you about your life, notwithstanding any paranormal ability, it still makes those people fascinating because they're doing something that by and large the rest of society can't do.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like to relate it the same way I think of all the photos and videos now that come out of people who are saying they have evidence of ghosts and spirits. Now, I think, as you put it, the waters are muddied by the amount of fakes that are out there.
Of course, yeah.
So because these are all out there, the real possible real photos and footage are lost in the deluge of all this. I think it's a possibility that if psychic ability exists, that waters are also muddied, and there may be individuals out there that may have these superpowers, and they are also lost in the deluge of the fakes that are out there.
Yeah.
Because if you type into Google psychics, you will get hundreds upon thousands of pages of people saying they are psychic.
Yeah, you will. Oh, yeah. It's the same as if you put Paranormal Investigation Team, you'll get a huge raft of those as well. It's interesting, though. You know, you talk about any particular latent paranormal or psychic ability. Is that let's just hypothesize and say that there are some individuals that can actually do that. What is it that they're communicating with? Because then that opens up that whole PSI, and survival discussion and debate. Because if you argue that they're talking to an individual, that person is sentient, intelligent, and they're there, they're just, you can't see them in another dimension, that's evidence potentially for survival. But if you're saying that they're picking up on, or if the view is that they're picking up on just residual information and a personality that was once here but is no longer able to communicate, then that shifts more down towards the psi argument, which is there's just something that remains of that person, but their intelligence and their personality is gone. So which side, I'm testing you here, which side would you fall down on if we say, let's say that being a psychic medium is real, there's a lot of fakes, but there's one individual on this planet that can do it, where would you fall? Would you fall down on the survival side, or would you fall down on the psi side of the argument?
Put me on the spot, James.
I think it's just an interesting thing, because I know where what I feel about that. You know, do I think that a person when they die survives physical death, or do I think that there's some kind of imprint that's left which somebody can still tap into? And I think that's really the kind of the question that I'm asking.
I think through personal experience, because I have seen apparitions of family member. So do I believe there are ghosts of dead people? Yes.
Right. Is
it possible that somebody could tune into that? Yes, there's always a possibility to say that has happened. Do I think people can? I think people may be extremely observant to their environment that they're in. If you go into somebody's home, you'll see photos and all kinds of things. You can tell a lot about a person just by their Blu-ray collection. Never mind, their possessions in their home.
Yeah.
I think I would fall into the fact that they may possibly talking to something that may be a dead person.
So let's just explore that a little bit further. So I was asking about the psi or survival side of it. So
I think it could be a survival.
So you think that maybe something of the personality and the sentient side of that individual could remain?
Through experience and investigations and stuff that we've done, we have got intelligent responses, or at least what I would perceive as intelligent responses to questions and reactions to stuff we've asked alleged spirits to do. Yeah. For me, that takes intelligence. It'd be extremely coincidental if it just so happens to be a tap happening at the time when you ask that question, on every question that you're asking, unless you see people who do the torch trick where they can time
the mag light torch trick.
I tried to explain that to investigators recently, and they shot me down, even though I explained to them how exactly, and it's proven how it works.
Oh, yeah, it is, yeah.
And they still wouldn't believe me.
Yeah, Steve Parsons covered that on the interview show that I did with him. He explained how that worked as well.
I had a joke with him on Twitter about it, because I mentioned it.
And I think he even mentions it in Ghostology. So if you ever read the book Ghostology, which I think you have, anybody else out there that's got Ghostology, Steve Parsons talks about the mag light torch trick in there as well as other things like the human pendulum.
He actually explains how it works in there, and how he got caught up in it when it first came out.
Yeah, and the level of information that could be garnered from something that is known to have just been pure physics, but they got the name of an individual and when they died and all that sort of stuff, but actually they got it from just the fact that this thing was expanding and contracting on the contact and causing the light to go on and off, and that they found that individuals increased or decreased the rate at which they asked questions subconsciously to time in with the response of the light. So the light was conditioning the human, which is fascinating. Extremely. The fact that it altered human behaviour. They set up their fall, they fell for it, they'd fooled themselves, and then got stuck in this cyclical loop of making the same mistakes over and over again and interpreting that for communication.
Yeah, and to be fair, when I did point out the torch trick and how it worked, at least one of the individuals you could tell they were visibly angry with me, and I had to calm it down very quickly.
That's proof positive of the sort of reaction that you will get in the paranormal field from a certain quarter of the community when you explain something, because there are some people that for them explanation is not required. They've already made their minds up, and you can't call yourself an investigator if you've already drawn a conclusion. That's new evidence. You know, as an investigator, you should be like a sponge, sucking up information and data and recalibrating constantly. And you gave them new data with which to question conclusions they'd already drawn. A great investigator will go, thanks for that, I'll go back and I'll review. They didn't. They just were like, no, I've made my mind up, I'm not happy with that explanation.
The interesting thing about that is ultimately people twist facts to suit theories when they should be twisting theories to suit facts.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
And that's what was happening there. The new information that I gave, and it's factual evidence, it's not something that I made up on the spot to suggest how it works, was blocked because it didn't fit in with their belief structure of how it works, because they'd had investigations before where, as you put it, where you said they were being conditioned to fall into that trap and they just didn't realise. They
fooled themselves.
Yes.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. So where do you fall on this spectrum, James, from what you just posed to me?
It's an interesting concept to think that there may be some element of personality that can be imprinted somewhere, that person doesn't need to be sentient anymore. But I would be more likely to fall down the same side that you fall down on, simply because of alleged communication. Now, we only know a certain amount of information about our planet and about the universe, really. We talked about this at length on other shows, about our limitations of our knowledge of how the mind works. Now, let's use the photograph analogy, because I think that could work quite well. If I take a photograph of you now, I have a snapshot in time, but it hasn't captured anything of your personality, it's just captured a photograph of you. What's to say that the world, the universe, everything that we occupy, that when a snapshot in time is taken, it's not just a snapshot that is visual, it's a snapshot of everything. So everything that you're made of, everything that you think, everything about you is happening all the time and being constantly snapshotted. The camera's designed to take just an image, and it's limited in that respect. What's to say that the universe isn't limited in that respect? We're all just made of matter and light, right? The camera only takes the light, but the universe might take everything. So you might die, and I might die, and everything that we are physically ceases to exist in the current form. But somewhere within time and the universe, we've been recorded and are being recorded. Could that then be that somebody who has this latent psychic ability able to tap into the universal recording of you, of your personality? So you're no longer alive, you're no longer conscious, but that person is able to access everything that you ever were. Do you see what I'm getting at?
I do, but then my next question would be is how?
But that's what I'm saying. I don't know how. If the argument is that none of that can be created nor destroyed, it's going to be recorded somehow. Time may record it. So we may be constantly, everything that we do may be like a constant photograph, but it's a full 360 degree recording of you.
The universe, in essence, then could be basically a giant computer. And then once you die, although your program has ceased to exist, it's still running in the background on the computer.
That would be another analogy. So everything that you are is the data. The data about Adie. And the universe records that, because you're never gone. You may die and everything about you's gone, right? Everything about everybody that's listening to this will be gone at some point. But will they? Everything you ever were and ever will be and are at the moment will never go anywhere. Can't see it, can't interact with it in the same way, but it's still there somewhere.
That's a very fascinating way of looking at it. I've never thought of it like that.
So a universal recording of everything.
It's almost like stone tape theory.
Yeah, but perpetual, never ending, not a snapshot.
Yeah, exactly.
if I take multiple images of you moving,
it becomes a video.
Yeah, exactly. You put them together, right? So that's a limitation. All that a video camera is a basically frame by frame photographs.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's audio recorded as
24
well.
frames, and it just plays it. Blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah.
But what if the universe does that, and that that can be accessed at any point because it's an infinite video recording, but not just how you look, how you sound, but how you think, what your hopes and dreams and aspirations are, everything that you are, were, and ever will be recorded forever.
James has stumped me.
Just one of my. I don't know. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying that that's the way that I think
I don't mean
about
in that respect.
these
You've stumped me, as in it's not something I've thought about in that respect. So this is just literally a thought you've just had.
Yeah, pretty much. The photograph theory has always been something that I've kind of thought about. The snapshot. I'm not saying that a photo will capture who you are, because we know that it won't do that. But how somebody's personality could be recorded, and how somebody can be seen still long after they've died, and maybe how even that can degrade because it's being overwritten, or it's expanding with the universe as the universe is expanding and that data's becoming corrupted. I don't know, but
what you're saying about degradation, though, that would explain why certain spirits cease to be seen anymore, where they were seen in a very regular way. Maybe they've just literally broken down over time.
Yeah, like the initial point at which it's recorded ripples, and those ripples only ripple out as far as they can go, and then it starts to
like on a lake,
dissipate or something. I don't know. It's just I don't know. Have we got another question? We got another one of Lou's questions.
Well, I think we were going to talk about psychics in this episode, and I think this whole episode maybe just be Louise's questions.
Yeah, which is fine.
Yeah, very good questions.
They are.
Right, where did we get to? Okay. Why do you feel some individuals are gifted with the power to communicate with the dead and some are not?
Right, we've kind of already answered that question.
Yeah, I was just about to say
I think for me that kind of ties back in with what I said about people who are extra sensitive. So I'm not talking about ESP, although it's kind of extrasensory perception, but I don't believe that these people have an extra sensory perception in the sense that they go beyond normal senses. I think they have the same faculties that you and I have, but there is just something that magnifies it, and they're able to, like you said before about the micro gestures, the look in somebody's eye, their emotional state, just the way they hold their selves, inflections in their voice. They can pick up on all of that. I think it's just magnified for them, and they can just read that. That's at an emotional level. They kind of get you emotionally. They know what sort of emotional state you're in. And then I think in terms of the information that they're able to then relay back to you, maybe we all have that ability. Maybe, I know there are theories out there about brainwaves and the fact that brainwaves are being communicated in the same way that radio waves are being created, and somehow it's possible to tap in to people's brainwaves in the same way. So that person may be reading a brainwave and being able to synchronize with that and see what you're thinking or feel what you're feeling. So I don't know if it's some can't or some don't. I think everybody probably can, but some do it naturally, but some learn it, because there are people that say, I thought I had psychic ability, I went to see this psychic and they taught me how to focus. And I think other people may just be completely switched off to it, but I don't think they lack it, unless you're disabled or whatever. I'm not covering those things, but we've all got 2 arms and 2 legs as human beings. Some people are great runners, right? Some people are fantastic runners, but they've still got the same mechanics. And I think that's just the same for people who have the ability and people that don't. If that ability exists, I think it's some are extra sensitive and others aren't.
Yeah, same sort of similar thing to what I was thinking. I do know that there are people that offer courses out there to become psychic, because the one thing you do hear from psychics, at least
what they call development circles and all that sort of stuff.
At least the people I've spoken to is, you can do this too, Adie. We just need to open you up so you can.
Yeah.
And that comes from every psychic. You don't get it from, you don't get people going, no, it's only me who can do this because I'm special.
Right.
Most of these people tend to tell you can do this too. Mm-hmm. Which is fascinating to think of.
It is, because that might be an inherent truth, mightn't it?
Exactly.
They may not be lying.
Exactly what I'm getting at. So if it's a learned behaviour, that of something that we can do, and these people can show us the way of doing it, I'm not so sure how, but if they can show you how to do it, then theoretically we're all psychic anyway.
Yeah. Well, there's a theory about I forget the name of it, but it's a gland in the brain that is situated in the centre of your brain, just between your eyes, and apparently people who have this psychic ability, who have had brain scans done while they've been doing things.
Other areas of their brain light up that don't normally.
And this particular area is enlarged in people that apparently have this ability. Now that kind of goes back to this deep-seated belief about the third eye, and pretty much where I'm pointing to in between my eyes is pretty much where that gland is. So some psychics and shaman will talk about opening up your third eye and being able to see. Now it could be something linked back to where people knew that it was this region of the brain where this gland existed and that needed to be developed in order to heighten your awareness of the world around you.
Speaking of the third eye, this is something that everybody can do out there in the ether is listening to us right now. Take your finger and literally sit it almost just above the top of your eyes, and you will feel a slight pressure without touching your head. What causes that? Now, if that's in the position that's meant to be the third eye, then theoretically, and you can all do it, I'm not making it up, literally I'm doing it right now in front of James.
Yeah.
If you put your finger there, you will feel like there's something reaching out, so to speak, and you can feel it in your head like you're touching something, even though you're not actually touching it. Is that the third eye they're talking about?
Possibly. But like I said, this gland, and I wish I knew the name of it.
I know the pituitary gland is just here.
Yeah, it's not the pituitary, it's
and
something
I think
else.
it's a bit further back, you're speaking directly in the centre, right? I'm not sure the name of the... I can find out.
I can't remember the name of it. There's a specific gland that apparently is developed in people that have that ability anyway.
Would you like me to find out?
Yeah, have a quick look.
I love Google.
Yeah, you're hearing it live, ladies and gentlemen. We're using Google to answer that particular question.
Yeah,
I think it begins with a P. That's why I was thinking pituitary, but it isn't the pituitary gland.
The pineal gland.
That's it. That's it.
Pineal gland.
And that's what people call the third eye.
Yeah. The pineal gland is situated in the mid-region of the brain, exactly level with the position of the third eye. That may be exactly what we're doing when we do that little...
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Out there. So popular in Eastern religion and mystical philosophy, is about the size of a large grain of rice and is shaped like a tiny pea cone. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, so there you go. So physiologically, this gland exists. There's some suggestion that it is linked to psychic ability. And, there may be fraudsters out there. There may be people that are doing it and believing that they're doing it, and they may actually be doing something. Let's not discount it completely. Let's say that there may be something totally normal and natural going on, and it's really strange. I say strange. It's not. People will consider it to be strange that this gland exists and that it seems to be linked with that ability, and that thousands of years ago this was also known. But I think that humans always know. I think that all of these wives' tales and old stories about particular things in our mind, all things like the chakras, all these sorts of things, pressure points, that's all been borne out. Look at things like acupuncture and reflexology. All of those things are being practiced now. They work because they're physiologically correct. There's a response. If you touch certain areas, you can feel other areas tingle, and without going into loads of detail. But that's true, that exists. Thousands of years ago people knew that. This is why I think that it's an inherent truth, and that we need to start listening more to those and researching those. Is there any truth in this particular belief? Is there something that they're saying about the brain that means that they can do this particular thing and use this particular skill? If that gland is showing that yes they can, there really could be people who are hypersensitive but not talking to spirits, but they might just be able to connect with you on a deeper level because their development is there, and maybe yes you can learn that in that case.
Or maybe they just have access to regions of the brains we don't.
Yeah.
We are, I believe, we only use a certain percentage of our brain, and it's so small. Who's to say that these people have access to those parts of the brain?
Exactly.
Not just the gland you're speaking about. I just mean in general.
Yeah.
If these alleged psychics are tuning into that, I don't know. Maybe it was set off in some way. I know some people. I've heard stories that they only began to develop these skills after they'd had an accident or a bump on their head in some way or another.
Right. So it forced their brain to maybe do something different.
Or maybe it rerouted.
Yeah.
Things that would normally would go a certain way. You know, the electrons fired in a different direction and activated this part of the brain.
We know that happens, don't we? We've seen that on medical programs, you know, where somebody's suffered head trauma or they've had a brain operation, but they're still able to do something because their brain has organically rerouted, and they've had to learn it again, like learn to walk again, but the process in their brain that was once used is no longer there, but it just reroutes and finds an alternate route, which is fascinating. That the brain
absolutely. I believe I read a story once that there was somebody who had surgery. They were English, I believe, or American. They spoke English. That's what I'm trying to say. And when they woke up, they could speak a completely different language, but they couldn't speak their own.
Wow.
That's fascinating. How did that person do that?
So this is the ability to speak a language that has not been learned.
Indeed.
Yeah, and there's a word for that. What's the word? Is it something like xenolinguist or?
No, it's xenolinguistics.
Xenolinguistics.
Yeah, I actually
something like that.
Funny enough, I actually have an app that will have it on.
Right.
Because I like to understand the
I
things.
thought it was xenolinguistics or something like that.
I'll see if I can find the one it was, because I read this the other day. Funny enough, I don't switch off that much. I'd like to. That's why I'm watching Quantum Leap. It allows me to switch off. I love Quantum Leap. That's
a fascinating thing, though, isn't it? To be able to speak in a language that you hadn't previously known. You know, it's one thing to speak in an alternate language.
I actually mentioned this the other day. Stupid boy, Adie. Xenoglossy.
Right.
That I actually.
This was the talking in tongues, wasn't it?
Yeah, same sort of thing, but it's called xenoglossy, the ability to speak or write in a language that has not been learned.
Right. Okay.
So that's what you were getting at.
Right.
Fantastic. Another great question. If you send us questions, you'll, especially James. James is a lot better at it than I am. I have to actually sit and think about things before I come out with, I think, something I'm happy with saying. Whereas yourself, you're very good at reading something and having an instant thought.
Right. Okay.
You know, I don't think I'm that way. Mine takes time to.
Right. Okay. Well, I do a
develop
lot
in
of
my head.
reading, as you can, as you can see. I do a lot of reading and a lot of research. But I also have my own theories, so of course I'm going to speak. I can speak more fluidly about them because I've already kind of thought about things, but I hadn't thought about the whole universal snapshot theory until you asked the question. So
sometimes, though, my problem is that I've obviously made my mind up about things with some of the things we've been discussing today, and you can tell because I've been very much. This is what I'm saying. I'm sticking by it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I've only been doing that of late. I don't know why. Maybe I'm getting a bit. Maybe I need a holiday from the.
I don't know. Maybe you're an evidence-based person like I am. Maybe just now the evidence stacks up and you've drawn that conclusion.
No, but I don't want it to.
Right. Right.
I don't want it to.
You want to be a bit more fluid again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because I think it stems growth once you.
It certainly does.
Right. Next question from Lou.
Okay.
Do you believe that mediums have the ability to give their bodies over to a spirit, i.e. possession, Or is it something that has possibly stemmed from American film and TV?
Oh, that is a great question.
It's a great question. But these type of things have happened before the media got hold of them. So it doesn't...
Well, have they? Let's define media.
Okay. Watching TV and movies, where now it has become trendy to do possessions and, I hate to say it again, demons and so-called things.
Do you extend that as far as books?
Sure.
Written accounts?
Sure, books. But I think these days...
Or we're talking mass media?
We're talking mass media.
Right,
because these days I think it more stems from TV and movies and impressionable people who watch these movies and TV and take it in and believe that's what it is. But do I believe mediums can do it? I have seen people go into trans mediumship. Very interestingly too. One compelling story pops to mind.
Okay.
Because I think it's possible, because the experience stacked up in a way where there was different things that were playing off each other would make me believe that this person was doing exactly what this person said he was doing.
Okay.
So we were on an investigation in an old people's home, or at least it used to be an old people's home. It closed down, and the medium that was there went into a want for a better word, trance.
Okay.
And he said he was going to go into a trance, see if he could pick things up. And I was like, yeah, okay, fine, fair enough. Well, I continued watching the rest of the team, watching at least one person at that group I didn't know faking stuff on this table tipping exercise. I could see them doing it, fake. And we were downstairs in this room, and there was an upstairs, big grand entrance stairs that go upstairs, and the doors are on some kind of springs. So if you open the door, it comes back on itself.
Okay, yeah.
And
a bit like a fire door sort of thing.
Yeah, kind of like that. And we're downstairs, and this medium's doing his thing. And he, after about 20 minutes, so it wasn't like something he did after 30 seconds and then went, "Oh, spirits are here," or anything like that. He literally said, "He's coming." Just straight out like that, he's coming. And as that happened, we heard a door upstairs slam.
Okay.
Almost immediately after he said those words, where the room of the people in there screamed, apart from myself, where I told everyone to shut up and calm down.
Yeah.
Because this is what we're here for. If something's happening, this is what we're here for.
Exactly.
What are you getting upset about?
Yeah.
And I went to look outside, the room, and decided to venture out and see if I could see if there was anything there, or a person had got in and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I didn't. There was nothing there that I could see with my extremely powerful torch. And then walked back in where this... the interesting thing, he started talking. The medium was like he was having a chat to somebody, but it was the only one side we could hear. And he was going, no, I'm fine. What? No, look. And he starts lifting his arms up and his legs and says, "I'm fine." Okay, what? And a proper conversation, like you were watching an extremely talented actor.
Yeah.
Doing those type of things. And then when the person woke up, I said, because I kept trying to ask questions and he couldn't hear me or whatnot. So I said, when he came out of his trance, I said, "What the hell was that about?" What? I said, "Well, we heard this," and I explained what happened. I says, "But who the hell were you talking to?" And he says, "I was just talking to my granddad. He was a doctor, and he was just asking me if I was all right." He was giving me a once over. Incredible, right? Incredible story.
That is interesting. But at what point did he give up his body for control in that sense? Then
the interesting part was he actually didn't, did he? But it reminded me of what was going on, because he said he was using trans mediumship, so
right.
he did start talking like there was somebody else in him. Yeah. But the bit that I remembered wasn't that, because
so it was like an internal discussion then.
Yeah.
He was talking to somebody that was in his head as opposed to...
Yes, precisely.
Right. Okay, that's bizarre.
But it was fascinating to watch. Yeah. Really fascinating to watch, and plus with what happened with a slamming door, which would not happen. It was not a windy night. The doors can't be pushed open and slammed on themselves because they're on that spring.
You could still argue as a coincidence, but if it was...
It was a fantastic...
If it was well timed.
Yes, and that's what I've said before many times. It's a hell of a coincidence for things to happen like that all the time. Yes, coincidence does happen.
Certainly for something physical.
Yes, exactly. And it was so loud too. The amount of ferocity in what happened made me go, all right, there's somebody in the building that we don't know about. Mm-hmm. That's what I thought.
Yeah, of course, that would be your first... The whole Occam's razor approach, exactly. Isn't it? Yeah.
But there was nobody in there because I would have heard him come down the stairs, even though we've checked everything. There's only one way out. But the conversation is fascinating.
But so Lou's question was on about possession, though, wasn't it? So it was about, do we think that psychics can give up their body for control by an entity like possession?
I think she's probably talking about somebody like Derek Acorah, who used to do it on a regular basis on his show.
Well, yeah, the whole Creed Kafer.
Yeah, exactly.
Thing. Yeah.
I'm unsure. I've seen some incredible things of mediums going into a trans-medium state where they are starting to talk to you as somebody else. This has happened to me at the Falstaff, of all places. I went with a friend of ours. The same medium came along.
Right.
And was upstairs in the attic, the seance room, if you will.
Yeah.
And a possible alleged spirit might come into contact with this George.
Okay.
Came and I've got to point out this medium did not know about that.
Interesting.
Did not know about that situation.
Interesting.
Started saying his name was George, and it was really good to see me again.
Wow, okay, now that is interesting.
Extremely.
Yeah, because you'd had a dialogue with this George a couple of years before on a different investigation.
At least. And he said...
And that George claimed to be following you around, didn't
he? He did, and we actually had it show up again when we were at
That is interesting.
So
especially you've got a separate psychic that is supposedly picking up on a similar entity. That's fascinating.
And when I turn around and say that there are some psychics out there that are extremely compelling, that's why I put so much credence in the guy.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, and he was clearly being possessed by this George, or at least this George was talking through him at that point.
Yes. And to be fair, it made me feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I imagine it would do, because she's always got some kind of spirit stalker, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. I'm not so sure. I really don't know. I don't think it's beyond the wit of man to think that it would be possible, because if an entity, if a personality can survive physical death, and that their soul or the spirit or whatever it is that you want to call it still exists, and had at one point occupied the flesh and blood when they were alive, why would they not be able to reconnect with flesh and blood in order to become a living, breathing person again, even though potentially if that another person's alive, that they're occupying their body, that they can sit alongside somehow within that person's mind and control them and kind of put the other person on hold for a bit. I find it fascinating. I don't know if it's possible. Like you said, witness that sort of thing going on. I wouldn't say that I believe it 100%, but I'd say that I wouldn't discount it, because if you say that we believe there may be discarnate entities who can affect the physical world, and that it was normal and natural for them to occupy flesh and blood, then why would it suddenly be impossible for them to do it again? So I'd say that for me it's entirely possible. So another interesting question.
Right, I have another question.
Next question. So who's this from?
This is from Paranormal Dead on Twitter, at paranormal_dead.
Okay.
She says, so as you both do a lot of obvious research, have you actually gone down the road of researching the inner circle or closed circle to open minds in the psychic world of intuition and energy?
Okay, interesting phrased question. I would interpret that question to be that obviously we've done research into the paranormal, but have we actually ever involved ourselves with some of the groups like, I don't know, development circles or talk directly with mediums about what it is that makes them tick and how it is that they can do what they do, perhaps. I think if that's the question, if I've interpreted that correct, I'd say to a certain extent. We've obviously talked to a lot of psychics and mediums and asked how they do things, and they explain how it's done. I've never been to a development circle. I'd love to go to a development circle just to observe how they actually do what they do. Have you got any other response to that particular question in terms of research, or are you on the same page as me with that?
I am on the same page as you. I ask more questions than the general ghost hunter, and for the people I have worked with over the years, I'm constantly asking questions on how they do things. Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah,
thanks.
Good question. Thank you very much.
We have 2 more questions.
Okay.
Not related to psychics, I don't believe.
Okay. So just general paranormal.
General paranormal questions. Okay, and this is from Joan Moo Joey, or at Joan Moo Joey, or Joe Compusta is his name on Twitter. If the paranormal is real, is it possibly unknowable? No, sorry. Is it possibly unknowable, and why?
So let me get this right in my mind, I don't want to do anybody a disservice. If the paranormal is real, would it be unknowable, and why? If it is real.
That's the question.
It's an interesting one, because it's a bit of a logic puzzle, that is. For me, one cancels out the other, because if the paranormal becomes explainable, then it can't be paranormal.
No, because it wouldn't be anymore.
Exactly.
Well,
I wonder whether or not what he's asking is, will we ever be able to explain paranormal phenomena if paranormal phenomena actually exists? So if a ghost exists, for example, if ghosts are real, will we ever be able to explain them? And I think that's probably what he's getting at. For example,
it's extremely fantastical, though, the things that we do. It's possible. There's always a possibility.
Yeah.
For those
they
type
might
of
be
things.
explainable, as in they don't exist.
Exactly. Why don't we? Multiple ways you can look at this. Things that happened a long time ago, 1500s, even before that, we would think of it of a certain way at that point, until further down the line, science has explained certain things that back then we would have probably considered magical.
Yes, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Fire, for instance. I wonder if when that first came around, the prehistoric people, they must have been absolutely fascinated, and probably thought of it in a way where this came from elsewhere.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head here. This is what I find fascinating about that. You've mentioned fire. That's a brilliant example. Totally on point. Mankind discovered fire for himself, right? Man made fire at some point by rubbing sticks and stones together. Would have seen fires break out naturally because of things like lightning strikes and stuff like that, but effectively a man can create fire, and has done thousands of years ago, millennia ago. The ancient Greeks, for example, tell us that Prometheus gave fire to man, but that was only told to us thousands of years after the fact. So prehistoric man was creating fires tens of thousands of years, maybe more, before the Prometheus legend came around. So yet we kind of lie to ourselves that something that is normal, that was discovered in a normal, natural manner, suddenly takes on a supernatural quality. And this goes back to my argument before on this show, but in a few other shows as well, where I'm saying there's an inherent truth to a lot of this, and that most of it I suggest is natural and normal, and that with time we've added supernatural concepts to it to dress it up in order to promote a particular belief system.
It basically becomes like Chinese whispers.
Yeah. Or it's used to convince people
Precisely.
Fire isn't for you, you should make it. That was given to us, it's a gift.
If you listen to Brian Cox, where he says, we've actually already explained it, it doesn't exist. We chose, well, not all of us, but we have chosen to ignore the fact that scientists have unequivocally turned around and said, no, it doesn't exist. Why did we choose to ignore it?
Because there remains compelling eyewitness testimony and a raft of evidence to suggest that something exists that is still as yet unexplainable, that science hasn't explained.
And if we look at it a different way, science evolves. And that's what I think will happen. I think it may happen the day where the fantasists wake up and they stop trusting their beliefs and start trusting more facts.
Mm-hmm.
We may actually start move into that direction that Joe is talking about.
About being knowable.
Yeah, about being knowable instead of unknowable. Unfortunately,
Exactly.
we are stuck in that position, unfortunately, and we have been for at least the last 200 years, where we're still looking at it from a spiritualistic side. And
there's no need to do that, is
No.
there really? And I think, what you just talked about kind of feeds in with the field of paranormal research per se, in the sense that, and I think Steve Parsons kind of already hinted at this, given his Twitter name, Parascience.
Yeah.
Okay? So we've got mainstream science, where things that are knowable are already being explained. Chemistry, biology, physics, all the rest of it. But then we've got parascience, which is just basically saying that paranormal phenomena exists and will be explainable within the realms of mainstream science. It's just that mainstream science has not yet caught up.
Yes.
And I think that's basically what you've just said, isn't it? Which is, we can't explain it at the moment, but we will be able to explain it eventually. That might be in 10,000 years, but it will happen.
Agreed. The paranormal is just science that has not been explained yet.
Exactly.
And that's how I think I look at this field, and I always have done. So yeah, that's my answer to that.
It's where there's a vacuum, isn't it? There's a vacuum, and it's human nature to apportion some degree of spirituality to it.
Yeah.
If it's not scientific, but it exists and it happens, it must be God, or it must be in some way supernatural. It must have some kind of spiritual meaning to it, as opposed to hard science, which is always very sort of carved in stone, for example.
Or 300 years ago we called it magic.
Yeah.
The science that's explainable now, the things that we do, the chemicals we use for a match, for instance.
Exactly.
Science worked that out, or chemistry worked that out.
Yeah.
Right, from the same chap. Is consciousness energy that cannot be destroyed? And if so, why no paranormal contact in non-linear time before a person is born as a human?
Okay, so this works on the premise that human consciousness and personalities exist pre-birth,
Mm-hmm.
which, for me, raises a question about whether or not two types of personality exist: pre-birth and brand new, or linked to the reincarnation belief system.
That's what I thought he was going with. I thought he was talking about reincarnation in a roundabout way. I'm not sure about reincarnation in that respect. Do I believe it's a consciousness? Not so much, but I do have a theory that it may be passed down through genes in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Especially people that say, I remember I was this person 400 years ago. I wonder and theorise a little bit if it's possible that memories in some way can be passed down through the genes of your family.
Cellular memory.
Yes. And somehow it resurges in some way in certain people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a consciousness now. I just think it's some kind of memory that's passed down, because it always seems to be about a certain point of time that people remember.
There's been experiments done on cellular memory, proven experiments, where, for example, I think the experiments were done with leeches. They're attracted to blood, and they put the leech in a maze, and they put the blood at one end, and the leech works its way out eventually through trial and error to get to the blood. They then blend the leech, so they kill that leech. It's terrible, but they kill that leech and blend it, and they feed that leech to another leech. The other leech that has eaten and consumed that blended leech knows the root straight away, and it's a proven cellular memory. So if that can happen, then that's an interesting concept to think that maybe knowledge of previous lives is passed down through some form of cellular memory.
I believe it is.
My question would come from, though, is there are some people that are reincarnated that claim to have been people who they're not related to. So how would your cells take on the memories from an individual whose cells you haven't shared at any point?
Perhaps they are not. Perhaps it's some form of osmosis of they've read about something when they were younger, perhaps, and it's kind of stuck in their head somewhere. They've forgotten they've read about it, but they believe that they were this person.
Yeah, I mean, great example is from there was a woman in Denmark. I think it was Denmark or Sweden, I can't remember exactly, back in the 1970s, and she started singing a piece of music. Summer is a coming in. Summer is a coming in, loud sing cuckoo, that one. And she was Swedish or Danish, didn't know any English, and all of a sudden she was able to sing it. And they'd done some research into how she'd learnt this song if she didn't speak the language. But it turns out that she'd actually had a book in her childhood that had the musical notes in it and the lyrics, and she'd learnt it 20, 30 years ago, forgotten it, but then was able to just sing it, and it startled people it now to hear it. But actually, if they look back into her past, they found that, like you said, she'd learnt it, and that she'd then sort of repeated it back years later and thought it was some sort of sign of reincarnation, but it wasn't. There's other cases, fascinating ones. There was a man that claimed to have been a soldier that was killed in the Crimea, I think, whose name was Reuben Stafford. But some of the information that he gave was incorrect about his commanding officer, and about the use of a particular gun that wasn't in use at the time. So even though the information that he was able to give back was valid, some of it was incorrect. Now, if that person had been reincarnated, there wouldn't be any flaws in that information. So, but there's countless accounts of reincarnation, and as I mentioned before about deep-seated knowledge and truths that go back millennia, most of the Eastern religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, have reincarnation as part of their belief system. Now, if you can argue that religion comes from inherent truth, because it possibly could do, ghosts and spirits are within religions, as well as, you know, some of these reincarnation stories, could that be potentially where they've come from, that we are reincarnated? I don't know. There's evidence for it. As to how robust that evidence is when you hold it up against your theory over osmosis, which is probably more likely, and that maybe humans have interpreted the information they've garnered through that system.
Interpretation, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
You just remind a story of another psychic medium.
Okay.
I was out at Gracedew Priory.
Okay.
With a group of people. It was a charity event. They were trying to raise money for something. I can't remember what it was, to be fair. It was a long time ago. And there was a lady there who claimed to be psychic. Lovely lady. She was really polite and stuff like this. And she was. The people were lining up, I guess, to get some kind of reading from her. And what she was doing, she was taking hold of their hands. And I didn't really listen to what everyone else was doing. I was busy.
Yeah.
So I walk up to this lady who's sitting by a tree, and she takes hold of my hands after she's done it to loads of other people, and they've just gone, "Oh, that's lovely, thank you very much." Walked up, and she takes hold of my hands, and her eyes pop open. She goes, "Oh my God!" I went, "What's up?" You know, because I'm a bit taken aback.
Yeah.
She goes, "You have been here a very long time." I went, "Excuse me?" And she went, "You are an extremely old soul. You were here before we worked out how to make houses. That's how old you have been."
Okay.
So you can imagine the look on my face.
Yeah.
You know me very well, James. I'm sure I was making the face Amy spoke about.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at her going, "You're talking utter crap. You really are." you know. And she goes, "You are really good with your hands." And I'm thinking, I am the worst person at DIY you have ever met. I have issues putting bookshelves together. How the hell am I supposed to have been this person that was great with his hands? But that was talk. Basically, she was saying, I keep getting reincarnated and I keep coming back over and over and over. Perhaps that's why I'm more logical than most. Perhaps because of, if you believe in reincarnation, perhaps I've just been here a very long time. What was that? Groundhog Day, Bill Murray.
Yeah. Oh, great film.
Yeah, absolutely. He turns around in that movie and says, perhaps God isn't all that knowledgeable. It's just that he's been around so long, he knows everything.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's the same thing for us. If your spirit lives on in reincarnation, perhaps with the people that have been reincarnated, I don't know, time and time and time and time again, then perhaps eventually you just get so rational and logical because you've seen it all before in some way, and that translates through your memories in some way or another, as we were talking earlier on, just through time, and you end up where you are.
It's an interesting concept because it then hints at the in inverted commas, the life force of mankind is somehow finite and limited because it has to be recycled.
Yes.
It's not just constantly created, it's reused over and over again.
And the interesting thing about
fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And the interesting part about that is we all know that if let's say your father was a singer, it's more than likely that his son or daughter will also be able to sing because that comes from your parents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an argument for genetics.
I'm talking about genetics,
but again, genetics are cells, and maybe the cellular memory is
passed
on, and therefore could the personality come with that as well, potentially.
Agreed.
It's interesting.
There are people out there that are just naturally good at everything. You were talking about earlier on people that can run. I can't draw for shit. But there are people out there that could do it from a very early age, but where did they get the knowledge of being able to do it that way?
Yeah, exactly.
It was in them already.
Yeah, latent ability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are people out there that can sing. There are people out there that can swim like fish.
Yeah.
You know, all these things, I think, come from your genetics in some way or another. They're just there because people in your past, of your past family, had these abilities already, and it's been passed down to you. How many times have you heard say, skips a generation in our family?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's what reincarnation is.
Yeah.
I just think it's some form of latent memory that's passed through genetics in some way.
Interesting.
And because I also, these people, that they don't remember their full life for these people. It always seems to be a snapshot of something that happened.
Yeah, traumatic or something.
Exactly, which would make me think that it's... If they were indeed the reincarnation of this person, you would have more of a fuller memory of that person's life.
Yeah.
Not just a snapshot of something that happened.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's where my mind runs with that question.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. Interesting. That was a good question.
It was a really good, and for
Did
once,
we answer it? Was there anything on the back of that question that we haven't answered, or was that more about...
He just said, why no paranormal contact in non-linear time before a person is born as human? I think we've answered it.
Yeah, I think so. I suppose you know the other side of it would be not necessarily reincarnation, but just the ability to contact a entity that has not yet had an opportunity to be born. You know, so are we effectively talking about being able to contact what they class as elementals? You know, people that have never been people yet.
Yeah, it's the same thing with demons. They were never really a spirit of any kind. They were just demons to begin with.
Yeah, and if that's the case, you know, that's an interesting concept as well, because if an elemental, I'm calling it elemental, I don't subscribe to these things, but I'm using the terms that people would recognise. If you're able to contact an elemental pre-birth, a spirit that was in the queue to be born and hadn't been born yet, how would they communicate? What references would they use, given that they've never lived? So how would they communicate?
They have no knowledge base because they've never actually grown up around anything.
Yeah. Would it be pure emotion? You know, even emotions are learned. So would it be a very, very basic level of communication with that entity? Would it be so insignificant that maybe we can't communicate with them because they like I said, they have no term of reference to use in order to communicate with us, because communication requires some knowledge of your recipient and being able to empathise and understand and engage with that recipient. If you don't understand that recipient, it's almost like trying to talk to a tree. How do you communicate with a tree? Well, I don't know, it's a tree and I'm a human. It's the same as, well, I'm an elemental and you've lived and I never have. So I find that an interesting thing. So I would kind of go away from entities that have not yet been born. I don't think that anything like that would exist, or at least if it did exist, we wouldn't be able to communicate it with it, because it's a completely different entity to us.
Yeah, agreed.
So are we on the next question, or is that all
was
the
the
questions?
end of the questions.
They were, without a doubt, the best questions that we've ever had.
When me and you get chatting, something as, what was that, 8 questions?
Something like that, yeah.
And
I think it was like maybe 9, was it? Was it 6 from Lou, 2 from that guy?
Yes, so 9.
So 9 questions.
And we've just been chatting consistently.
Yeah, and we've kind of covered psychics.
I think so too.
We've covered the essence of what psychics and psychic mediums are all about. We don't need to talk about individuals. Yeah, we've mentioned 2 or 3 people, but actually that's not the point, is it?
No.
I can talk about, and as you can talk about, lists of people's names.
Which originally we were going to do.
Exactly.
The research I've been doing over the last few weeks was literally just that. I was looking into well-known names that I could connect to the audience so they would understand the people we were talking about, but I don't think we had to.
You know, the advert for this show was, who are they? Where do they come from? Are they real? Are they fake? And why are they so popular? Now, we've covered all of those elements of those questions.
Yes, I think so.
Who are they? They're human. Where do they come from? Well, the same place that everybody else has come from, really. Are they real? Possibly. Are they fake? Possibly. And why are they so popular? Because for whatever reason, they appeal to deep-seated human needs to talk about their emotional situations. People go to them because they need to. You don't wake up in the morning and just think, I'll have a cup of tea and then I go and see a psychic, just randomly. It's a conscious decision to go and do that.
Yeah.
People do that because they want an answer. And it's the same with any question in life. You know, you want an answer. And I think in part psychics provide an answer to that. But we aren't saying that's a definitive answer, because we don't think they are who they think they are.
I think they believe they are.
Yeah, but their belief might come from a truth. They might be what they think they are, but it'll be different. So they might think, I'm talking to spirit. Actually, they may not be. So I don't think we're saying all psychics are fake. What we're saying is that some people are gifted in whatever way, others aren't. There'll always be people like that. Some people claim to be doctors and they're not. Some people claim to be taxi drivers and they're not. You know, some people impersonate police officers. There'll always be frauds. But there will be people that are immensely useful, I think, to the world. And I think the research into those people going forward should be more fascinating, because we're looking at it from what makes them tick, not necessarily why we go to see them, but what makes them think that they can do what they do.
I think, I hope I'm not speaking for you as well with this, but I may be. You can stop me if I'm not. I think myself, I'm open to the possibility.
Exactly.
That's where I am. I'm open to the possibility. I'm not I may be rational and logical, and my brain fires off logical responses all the time. But when it comes to this particular one, I'm open to it. And to be fair, I'd be a shit investigator if I didn't.
Exactly, because you've already formulated an opinion and drawn a conclusion.
And we've talked about it tonight already, and for our listeners out there who are investigators or ghost hunters, you should grow. Don't make your mind up straight away, because once you've done that, you've already stopped. and we as investigators should be open to the possibilities and continue to think about those things that are happening,
Yes.
instead of making your mind up. Now, sometimes I think the way I speak, it sounds like I've made my mind up on certain things, maybe, and that's a failing of mine from personal experiences of things that have happened. But it doesn't mean I'm not open to the possibility of these things still happening.
Absolutely. So we haven't drawn a conclusion about something being real or not, because that's a really
Broad, that's a very broad statement
and
to
it's
make.
such a bold statement to say this is all fake.
So I really enjoyed this discussion.
Yeah, me too. Those questions were dynamite.
Absolutely
They're
brilliant.
absolutely fantastic.
Agreed.
Thank you ever so much for listening. We love you all, and we'll see you soon.
See you, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Cheerio.